So I think that puts a point on that game. We're going to travel outside of the SEC for the next game just to talk about a little bit a team that's flown under the radar with a really good record. West Virginia is looking at 8-1. They've got 3 games left, all in conference. But this weekend they've got Oklahoma at home. It's a weird matchup for me because Oklahoma, obviously not as good of a record, and people have kind of forgotten about this team throughout the year. But I'm going to tip my hand a little bit. I think Oklahoma destroys them this weekend. So without any kind of fanfare or covering it up, tell me, is that crazy too? I mean, what do you think?
Oh, me. You think Oklahoma destroys them? There's an argument for it, but I don't see it. I don't see Oklahoma destroying anybody all year, and I will give you the reason why. It's simply defense. Oklahoma, for all the gnashing of teeth, darn good offense this year. I mean, I don't. I'm not sure why they don't get more hype in a per. We like per play averages, and the reason why, because tempo is such a big deal right now nationally. That means some teams run a lot more plays. Teams, not only do they play, some teams have played more games at this point in the season and whatnot, but some teams just run more plays. And if you play teams with a higher tempo, that extends the game. So, if you're in a conference where you run up tempo or, you play Baylor. Well, if you play Baylor or you play Louisville, they're going to give you the ball. Not only will they score a lot of points, but they also go 3 and out a lot, and they give you the ball a ton, and you get to run a lot of plays, and you gain a lot of total yards. So we like yards per play because it's actually, somewhat standard if you're playing in a big boy league where teams are willing to grind out the clock versus a league where they're lot more pass happy, which stops the clock and you end up running more plays. Regardless, in a per play sense, there are 3 teams in the country that average 7.5. Well, actually 4 really that average 7.5 to 8 yards per play. 2 of them are Louisiana Tech and Western Kentucky, and the other 2 are Louisville and Oklahoma. So Oklahoma offensively is about 2/10 of a yard, 7.6 to 7.8 yards per play, 2/10 of a yard behind Louisville. They are right there. They have been just as explosive as Louisville. Probably don't get the recognition they deserve. A lot of it's whether or not you think the Big 12 is very good offensively, defensively. I would challenge that a lot of the ACC and the lower parts of it aren't any better than the Big 12. But that all that said and all that breath I just wasted, uh, kind of overlooks the other side of it, and that's it. Oklahoma can't play defense, and they're giving up an average of about 5.6 yards per play. That's not real good. And if you want to sort of extrapolate that out to what that means, their average opponent output's about what Tennessee would average in a per play sense. Tennessee's average game is about what Oklahoma faces. It's a little weird to say that and sort of put it in context, but point being, Oklahoma does not do a very good job defensively. So when they have faced good offenses, they have gotten run. They face Ohio State, put up 24 points, which is, I think was actually a pretty good game when you think about it, right?
Yeah, I do too.
Ohio State Ohio State is a very good defense. They haven't given up 20 points or more, but 3 times. They gave up 23 to Wisconsin, 24 to Penn State, 20 to Northwestern. So Oklahoma was the highest scoring game anybody's managed against Ohio State. The trick is Oklahoma gave up 45 points. And again, Texas, they put up 45. They give up 40. TCU put up 52, give up 46. Texas Tech give up 59, 24 to Iowa State. And even the Baylor win, which was kind of dominant in a lot of ways, they gave up 24 points. So it's just crazy, crazy high point totals allowed by Oklahoma. Lots and lots of big plays. Their secondary can kind of get bombed on. In a per play sense, really 5.6 yards per play. It's not even that bad. compared to just the abysmal scoring defense.
It part of my thinking that Oklahoma wins this game uh, is the flip side of that, where West Virginia has struggled. 26 against Missouri is a struggle. 17 against K State. 24 against Texas is actually kind of embarrassing, given how bad their defense has played this year. So I think there's times that we've seen West Virginia get bogged down, and the flip side of that is you could say, well, they're holding these teams. They hold Texas to 20, and they hold Texas Tech to 17. So I do think they play better defense, but I don't think anybody's stopping this Oklahoma offense. So that 24 against Ohio State, they're not playing that good a defense. West Virginia's not playing Ohio State defense. So I think that Oklahoma is going to score in the, I don't know, probably mid 30s, low 40s, and I don't think West Virginia is going to be able to keep up with them.
We had all this discussion, and I probably misled you. I don't think West Virginia wins this game. I think Oklahoma wins it. Very similar to the reason you said. I just don't think Oklahoma can blow them out. I think it's going to end up, maybe 31-24 or something like that.
Okay.
Where West Virginia gets in the 20s, or even a 41-34 kind of game. I just don't think Oklahoma's defense is good enough to create distance. And a good example is, you look at Texas, and West Virginia just gutted out a close game against Texas, right? 24-20. But it's easy to look at that and forget that Oklahoma won 45-40 to Texas.
Right.
Maybe they scored a lot of points, but it's almost the same exact margin of victory in a percentage sense. In a way, West Virginia was actually, Oklahoma was actually closer than the Texas game. And I know that some of that was late, but I don't know. I actually think it'll end up being close. What's more interesting to me is what wins out, right? West Virginia is probably the best defense right now in the Big 12. You would, I guess, maybe, and
which is really not
hard.
any kind of accolade of note.
Yeah, that's why I was about to say. That's why I keep saying kind of maybe, because it just saying the best defense in the Big 12 right now. I'm sorry, any Big 12 listeners, but it's a little painful as somebody who talks about the SEC. But it's what is this game going to be? Is it going to be a high scoring game? Is it going to be a low scoring game? I will say this, and I think it's worth noting: in the two games where Oklahoma scored in the 20s, they lost. I don't know that they can win a low scoring game, because I just don't know that their offense is consistent enough in a close game, and that their defense can keep another team from scoring.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. If this game isn't in at least the mid 30s, Oklahoma loses.
Right. And I think both of us have the same thought on a lot of this. Neither one of us has a lot of confidence right now in any Big 12 team. Shocking, I know, because that is the common vein from everyone around the country. But yeah, I think Oklahoma has gotten a little bit better. The running backs, or Mixon and Perine, are the key to that Oklahoma team. Their injuries in the Houston game is why they lost that game. I don't think they were quite right in the Ohio State game. Ohio State got away from them in a lot of ways too. Ohio State could run the ball with a power run in a way that nobody else in the Big 12 can, including West Virginia. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, how much can you take from West Virginia, holding TCU and Texas Tech and Kansas State to low points? I mean, Texas Tech's supposedly a great offense, but what does that mean? I don't know. I do think I think Oklahoma wins, and I keep rambling on because it's just it's such a crapshoot, and it will be so telling coming out of this game if West Virginia makes this a 20-point game, and I think they win in that scenario. Then I think you have to step back and go, Oklahoma, for all their faults, is a good offense. West Virginia is probably a complete team. But if Oklahoma makes this a 30-point game and wins, like I think both of us think they will, then we're going to walk out of it, not really knowing much more than we knew going in, other than, everybody in the Big 12 is trying to play an up-tempo offense, and nobody is really consistent offensively or defensively well enough to play at a high level.
Okay, so both of us think Oklahoma wins. If it's in the 20s, they lose. Last question to wrap this one up. If West Virginia wins this game, and looking at the rest of their schedule, Baylor, Iowa State, they have a strong inside shot at 11-1. So two questions here. One, does an 11-1 Big 12 conference champion, with all the turmoil that we see so far in the college football playoff race, do they get in? 11-1 conference champion, do they get in? And if not, is that fair?
Answer to the first question: no. I do not believe West Virginia will get in, even having beaten Oklahoma, and I will tell you why. And that's that, Oklahoma right now is ranked behind. They're ranked behind Texas A&M. They were ranked behind Wisconsin. They're ranked behind Penn State at 11. West Virginia, with one loss, only one loss, was all the way down at 16th. I mean, that's bad, right? I mean,
Right.
there's the committee looked at this and said there are 9 two-loss teams with a better resume than West Virginia with one loss. In fact, almost all the two-loss teams ended up ahead of West Virginia. We've talked about this a lot. The playoff committee, and I'm pleased with this. The playoff committee said it isn't really looking at win-loss total and calling at the end of it. They're saying, okay, what does the win-loss total mean? In a large degree, I think both of us think the first thing they say is who has the best win record. They almost look solely at the wins to say, what did you accomplish? And then they go back and look at the losses, and they kind of discount losses to good teams. And they basically say, do you have losses to bad teams that should drop you a peg? West Virginia does not have the wins on the resume necessary to bring them up. It's a shame for them because Missouri, when they scheduled that game, was actually probably a pretty darn good team when they first, around the time they first entered the SEC. Not that first year, but first 2 or 3 years they're making the East title game. But beyond that, they schedule BYU, and BYU is in a serious down year. So, I mean, you look down the list, and their ranked games are against Oklahoma State, and they lose. And the ranked game is against Oklahoma. Maybe they win. And it's that classic scenario we talk about a lot, where if you've got 3 good teams in a conference, and I think that's what we're seeing right now in the Big 12, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia, that all beat each other. And if West Virginia beats Oklahoma, that's what will have happened. Then you cannot take the fact that they all beat each other and then they beat the rest of the conference and say it's good or bad, because all we know is that Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia are as good as each other, and that those 3 teams are better than everyone else in the conference. And from there, we kind of have to take the 3 teams, treat them as if they're the same team for a lot of intensive purposes, so we can place them relative to other conferences. And when you do that, the thing that will hurt West Virginia, to sum all this whole thing up, is that Oklahoma got destroyed by Ohio State. And because of that, the playoff committee just can't look at the Big 12 as a whole, because Oklahoma State, their schedule was an absolute powder puff. I guess they beat Pitt, which, oddly looks a little better now, but none of these 3 teams has really done anything outside the conference to establish themselves as being any better than anybody outside the conference. There's no reason, and I'm not saying that it's right or wrong in a lot of ways, but as a pure data point, there's no data point to say that these 3 teams would have only had one loss in any other conference. So, yeah, that's just kind of where you're at.
And I think it's interesting because they are in a Power 5 conference, but there is an outside shot, y'all, that if Oklahoma loses this game and then loses to Oklahoma State, that West Virginia will be 11-1 in a Power 5 conference without any ranked wins on their schedule.
Yeah,
that is so hard to put into context and frame that as, I mean, that's like going back to the old, like, Houston schedules or the Boise schedules where they'd run the show like 12-0, 11-1, something like that, and get left out because they didn't have anybody on their schedule. And it's like, it sucks because you're just not in a good conference or you're not in a Power Five conference. That just puts the best summary on how bad the Big 12 is, that there is an outside shot that the Big 12 champion will go 11-1 and not have a single ranked win on their schedule.
Yeah, and if that scenario plays out, and again, both of us think Oklahoma wins this game, so it won't. The only finger that should be pointed here is the Big 12 pointing in itself. They did this because they only have 9 teams. They all may be playing each other, but that means they all beat each other up, right? If you have 9 teams, you're guaranteed that at most only one team can be undefeated to win the regular season. So most instances, you will never have an undefeated team. And there's no conference championship game, so you have no other opportunity. There's a lot of teams around the country, it seems like, maybe Washington, Clemson, probably with Virginia Tech. You're going to see it the Big 12, Big 10, and you'll probably, even as beat up as the East is, you'll see it in the SEC. Everybody gets their resume with an extra ranked win in the playoff game. Both of us have said this before. I don't think the conference championship in many ways is even as big a deal as being conference champion and having won the game. This is what I think killed TCU and Baylor versus Ohio State in 2014. It wasn't so much that it wasn't clear who won the champion. There was no championship game with TCU and Baylor. It's that Ohio State had the opportunity to play a top 15 Wisconsin and blow them out. That's what won Ohio State the clear playoff slot over TCU and Baylor that year. It wasn't that they had a championship game. It's that they played an extra ranked team and got to build up their resume. And if the Big 12 had any brains and actually moved to at least 12 teams, which every conference has been for a long time, if not 14, though at this point it's hard to find another 5 good teams to add to the conference. Then there'd be the possibility of some other ranked team that they could meet in a championship game and bolster their schedule. But instead, because there's so few teams in the Big 12, you can end up in a situation like this where you just happen to only have one that's ranked high, and it's like you said, it's kind of sad that there may only be one ranked team in the entirety of the Big 12.
And they're really kind of screwing themselves. And this goes back to what you said, and I'll end on this. The basket of wins that are available to a conference when you start a year, we talked about it in our preview show, or our review show from last week. There's only so many wins that are available in a conference, and then when you have intentionally cut that number of wins down because you only have 10 teams in your conference, and then everybody plays everybody, well, you are guaranteeing a lot of mediocrity, because you're guaranteeing that you're going to beat up on everybody, and it's going to be a bunch of 5-4 conference records. And it's absolutely ridiculous to me. Like you said, even if they added 2 not so great teams, they can at least spread some of that around and get some more wins and have the conference championship game that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to have a conference championship game, in my opinion, if everybody plays everybody. So it's disappointing.
Yeah, and I'll give a number to sort of back up. We talked about it in the recap, and I hope people do listen to those because we actually put some thought into them. And a lot of times I think our recaps people would find they're the most interesting things. We may be talking about what happened, but we're talking about, who teams are or are not based off what happened. But, here's the math of it, right? With a 14, when you have a 14 team conference and you have each team plays 8 games, that's 112 wins in the regular season. And it's a bag of 112 wins that you're seeing in the Big 10 or you're seeing in the SEC, and they're divvying those up, those 112 wins, 14 teams, 8 games each. some teams end up with 10, some teams end up with 2, but it's 112 that get distributed. So hopefully you have a handful of teams that can sort of absorb a bunch of those. And that's how you end up with, 4 or 5 teams ranked in the top 15, which we've seen at times from the SEC, because there's so many wins available spread out over the conference that if you're all like the SEC West winning all the games in the SEC East, um, that's just 2 free wins thrown into everybody's resume. In the same thing in the Pac-12 right now, there's an argument that theirs may be inflated because with a 9-game slate, that's 126 wins being spread up among the conference. They can sort of be divvied up, and the good teams can feast on all those. What did the Big Ten do? Right, they added Maryland and Rutgers. Nobody is losing to Maryland and Rutgers. All that's doing, really, is it's letting Ohio State and Michigan get a couple, maybe 2 extra wins on their resume where otherwise they'd have to go find somebody. They'd be playing somebody else that was a lot better in their conference. Instead of playing Maryland, you play Nebraska. Instead of playing Rutgers, you play, Northwestern. Those are much more losable games. It helps the resumes because they get to pull, the same token that Rutgers goes 0-8 in conference play. That's 8 wins that everybody else got that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And to sum it all up, in the Big 12 right now, with only 9 teams, that means there's only 72 wins to go around. 72 versus 126. So that's basically, that's 50 wins in the bag, so to speak, that can't be distributed. And it makes it so much harder for the conference to generate teams with really impressive records because you don't have, frankly, it's not even the good teams. There's I think a missed point here that you don't have as many bottom feeders to pad your schedule and pad your resume. And those bottom feeders, you think, well, how does it help you to have bottom feeders? We just said West Virginia will be the only ranked team. Well, if you have bottom feeders, what it does is it allows the Oklahoma States and it allows West Virginia to avoid having to play Oklahoma State. It avoids Oklahoma to have to be able to avoid playing West Virginia
until a championship game.
Right, until a championship game. And so, rather than ending the regular season with only one ranked team, what you do is you have a highly ranked Oklahoma, a highly ranked West Virginia that both end the season ranked, play in a conference championship, and then one of those 2 teams gets a big bump and makes it into the playoff. So you use those lower teams to generate multiple ranked teams. So 3 or 4 of them, and then the ranked teams can play each other in a conference championship game and launch themselves up. And it's the sneaky and honestly kind of crappy way all that works out. But the flip side of it, we will say, and we both talked about this in the recap, is in this whole discussion, we haven't actually said in any way that this makes teams better or worse. It doesn't. They're exactly the same teams. It's just when you have 14 teams in your conference, or when you have 14 and you're playing a 9-game conference slate, at the end of the day, you end up looking better from a win-loss standpoint than somebody that doesn't play as many games, even though it has nothing to do with how good the teams are. And that's how you get some really strange overranked teams to end the season from weak conferences.
And with that, I think we are going to close. We've covered just about everything we could cover this week. So that's our show for this week, y'all. Thanks again so much for hanging with us this long. And this long in the season, man. We're going into 12 weeks. Some of y'all have been here since the beginning. We can't tell you how much we thank you. I mean, it's awesome. We're getting great feedback in the comments. Please continue to that. If you like it, give us a like. If you really like it, give us a sub. Keep coming back each and every week because that's what we're going to do. So thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week. God bless.